What's up, guys? How's it going? Look, this is going to be a no-nonsense type of video. So let's cut straight to the chase. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the resume that got my sister a job at a private equity firm in New York City. So this is a very lucrative private equity job. The objective that I have for this video is to provide as much value as possible, okay? So my earnest request to all of you watching this video is that for the next few minutes, I'm not sure what the duration of this video is going to be, but for the next 10 or 15 minutes, right? Just keep aside any distractions that might be bothering you. You'll thank me later for having done so. If you want to take down notes, but just listen with rapt attention while perhaps taking down some notes if you want to, okay? Now, look, I don't think I need to emphasize the importance of having a stellar resume, but what I will say is that a resume is basically your professional story in written form. Look, everyone has a story. Everyone has a personal story. Everyone has a professional story, but not everyone is a good storyteller. Yeah. But in this video or through this video, you're going to learn about how you can actually tell a very compelling story such that you can gain an edge over your competition, especially when you're applying for very competitive roles in competitive industries such as finance, PE, so on and so forth. Okay. A brief background about my sister, just so that you guys have some context before we get into the meat of this video. So my sister started college at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania in August 2013. She's a couple of years younger than I am. I entered college in August 2011, but I call her the younger yet wiser sibling. She studied economics and finance when she was in college, and she graduated in 4 years. So she graduated May 2017. After she graduated, she worked in the credit investing division of an investment management firm called Apollo Global Management. So she had also interned with Apollo during a final summer when she was in college. She worked at Apollo for a couple of years, after which she jumped ship and moved to this private equity shop. And so the resume that we're going to be going over is the resume that she had used when applying to the private equity shop. Now, I completely understand that not everyone is as fortunate as my sister was, but even if you studied in India, even if you did not get an opportunity to go abroad for your education, even if you did not end up going to an Ivy League school, and you went to a very ordinary college like I went to, you will still benefit a lot from the tips, the tricks, and the best practices that I'm going to be talking about in this video. And this video is applicable not just for finance enthusiasts, but to anyone in general. The one thing that I think you may have noticed already is that her work experience is up top. You know, typically when you look at a resume, you typically see the education section of the resume up top. Look, there are many different schools of thought, you know, and I'm not saying one is right and the other is wrong, but I'm guessing the reason my sister has a work experience up top followed by the education section as opposed to, you know, having the education section up top is because this was not the first job that she was applying to coming out of college, right? So she had already worked for a couple of years after college and she was applying for a change in her job. When you've already gained or amassed a certain amount of work experience under your belt after college, then the work experience section of your resume, as opposed to the education section of your resume, holds a lot more weight. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to start with the education section on a resume. So we'll move in chronological order. So as I said, my sister went to the Wharton School of Business, University of Pennsylvania. She graduated with a cumulative GPA of a 3.71 out of 4.0. So fairly impressive. Now look, I totally understand that a high GPA may not necessarily be an indicator of high intelligence, as evidenced by the fact that I graduated college with a much higher GPA compared to my sister. I graduated with a 3.86, but look at me, you know, creating YouTube videos, whereas my sisters are doing all these fancy and sexy jobs. But what I will say is that a high GPA is definitely an indicator of strong work ethic, you know, and whenever you're applying for roles within the finance industry, especially for grueling roles such as investment banking, private equity as well to some extent, although not as grueling as investment banking can be, they definitely look for people who have strong work ethic. And so a GPA, you know, can be a bellwether, can be an indication of strong work ethic. Moving on, she's added relevant coursework. So she's listed, you know, all the finance classes, or at least the relevant finance classes. I think including relevant coursework is probably a lot more important if you're a non-finance major trying to break into finance, right? Because that shows that, yeah, even though you might not be a finance major, you've still taken like a few finance classes in college, or you've completed maybe a few online, you know, courses or online certifications in order to actually prop up your finance knowledge, despite the fact that you did not study finance as your major in college. After her relevant coursework, she's included a list of her achievements. Now, what I will say about achievements is that you want to make sure that you're listing out the achievements that are as relevant as possible to the job that you're actually applying to. Look, if I'm applying to a finance role, it doesn't make sense for me to list out my jerking off achievements and my jerking off records, right? So you want to make sure that your achievements that you're listing out are as relevant as possible. After achievements, my sisters listed out the activities that she was involved in. So these were, you know, the extracurricular activities that she took part in when she was in college. I cannot stress this enough, but it's imperative for you to actually be involved on campus. It's not enough for you to have a stellar GPA but not be involved on campus. This may sound cliched, but it's actually very true, especially when you're applying for finance roles. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work and no play makes Jill a dull girl. So make sure that you actually get involved on campus. And when I say involved on campus, it's not enough for you to actually just be a member of different organizations, right? Because all it takes to be a member of an organization is you pretty much like paying the membership dues and making sure that you're attending meetings on a regular basis, right? You should be gunning for leadership positions on campus in the organizations that you're involved in. Because as I said, banks, finance organizations absolutely love hiring leaders. So if you can actually demonstrate leadership, right, by virtue of your extracurricular involvement and have a stellar work ethic, the two of them make for a beautiful and lethal concoction. So a couple of examples. My sisters talked about the fact that she was a teaching assistant when she was in college for a few different classes. She was also involved in a finance organization on campus called Smart Women Securities, which actually befuddles me to some extent because I'm not sure what my sister was doing in an organization that involved smart women. Or maybe the name of the organization was a misnomer. Now moving on to the most important section on my sister's resume, her work experience. And given the fact that, you know, it's the most important, she's listed that up top. We'll talk about Apollo Global Management first, okay? So that's why my sister had spent 2 years from July of 2017 until I think about August of 2019 before jumping ship to the private equity shop. And she had also interned with Apollo during the summer of 2016 and had successfully managed to convert that internship into the full-time offer coming out of college. Within Apollo Global Management, you'll see that it's actually divided into two chunks, right? So the first chunk within Apollo Global Management are the first 4 bullets. So the first 4 bullets that she has are a lot more generic, right? They give you like a general sense of everything that her job at Apollo entailed. But the second chunk is a lot more specific because she's talking about selected transactions or selected deals that she was actually a part of. Let me make it abundantly clear that whenever you're working in the deal-making business, right, be it on the sell side or on the buy side, right, you are actually judged based upon the deals that you've worked on. You are judged on 2 things. Number 1, the nature of the deals that you've actually worked on, like how big are those deals, how meaningful were those deals, and number 2, what was your contribution to those deals. And that's exactly why she's dedicated like a good 40% or 50% of her entire resume talking about her deal making experience at Apollo. Within selected transactions and portfolio company experience, right, you will notice if you take a look at the first word that she's used to start each of her bullets, right? So these are called action verbs. Let's go over all of them. So she's used evaluated, conducted, prepared, assessed, constructed, analyzed, approved, presented, modeled. You can tell, given the strength of all of these action verbs that she's used, you get the impression that, you know, she did real shit during her 2 years that she spent at Apollo. You know, so it comes across a lot more convincing to a recruiter or to anyone who's taking a look at the resume, right? The other thing that's important for me to point out is the fact that she's used how many? Like maybe 8 or 9 action verbs, but she hasn't repeated any of them. All of them are different. So the material on her resume does not come across as superfluous or redundant or repetitive, given the diversity of the action verbs that she's actually used to describe everything that she did. The other thing that's very obvious, even to a blind person who might be looking at her resume, is the fact that she's used lots of numbers. Again, numbers is something that adds a lot of credibility to your resume. You know, instead of actually being generic, they add a lot more specificity to your resume. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the reasons that you actually clicked on this video is because I actually included my sister's salary figure, right? So case in point, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is you should try using as many numbers as possible, or you should just be as specific as possible as opposed to being vague and nebulous, only because, being specific adds a lot more credibility to the story that you're trying to tell through this resume of yours. Very smart and prudent on my sister's part to have devoted a lion's share of the work experience section on a resume to Apollo Global Management and very little to Citigroup, only because Apollo Global Management, that was the more recent experience, that was full-time as well, compared to Citigroup, which is more dated, and that was just an internship experience that she had during the summer of 2015. Lastly, let's move on to the skills and interest section on my sister's resume, which occupies the very bottom of her resume. She has languages included, and she mentions that she's fluent in English, Hindi, and Bengali. Very surprising that she mentions Bengali, given the fact that she doesn't speak more than 2 words in Bengali, but who's going to be questioning that, right? Then technical skills, she's included a few programming languages that she learned in school. I'm not sure how useful this is, but I'm guessing she's just included it, doesn't hurt, I'm guessing. Interest, now look, what I will say is that interest might be the last line item on your resume, but according to me, it's one of the most important line items. I think it's very underrated, very underappreciated, especially when you're working in a job that actually involves working in a team environment and serving clients. When you go out and get drinks with your colleagues, when you go out for client meetings, or you go out get drinks with your clients, right? You want to show that, you aren't a one-trick pony. You have many personas as opposed to just having a work persona. You don't want to come across as a dull, drab, stodgy, staid type of personality. And so I think having, interests definitely helps you come across as a fascinating personality that people want to spend 10, 12, 14, 16 hours every single day at the office with. In conclusion, I ought to tell you that, look, it's incredibly difficult, if not next to impossible, to actually end up getting a buy-side job coming out of college. A lot of people actually transition from the sell side to the buy side. So they spend maybe a couple of years, maybe 1 year doing investment banking on the sell side and then moving to the buy side. Despite the fact that my sister had a stellar track record academically speaking, as well as from an extracurricular perspective when she was in college, despite the fact that she went to Wharton, she still tells me, or she still told me back when she was actually applying for full-time jobs coming out of college, that she considered herself to be extremely lucky to have gotten a job on the buy side working at Apollo straight after college, straight after her undergrad. So, don't be too hard on yourself if you're finding it next to impossible to get a buy-side job. You can first start off with the sell side. You have very lucrative, very respectable jobs on the sell side as well. And then maybe after a few years, transition to the buy side. You can download the PDF version of my sister's resume through the link in the description. All I ask in return is that you like this video and subscribe to my channel. I think that's a fair trade, isn't it? If you're not sold on that offer, let me give you a sweetener. So the next couple of videos on my channel will be a day in the life of a private equity analyst featuring my sister Aastha Jain, and why my sister ultimately left the finance industry for a much lower paying job at a startup. So definitely subscribe to my channel. You can turn on the notification bell as well so that you're notified of every single one of my upcoming releases. Another massive announcement, I'm going to be doing a live stream with my sister this Wednesday, June 30th at 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Speaking of upcoming events, I'm going to be hosting an online workshop on communication skills called the A to Z of communication skills this Sunday, July 4th from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And you can find out more details about the workshop through the link in the description. In case you want to connect with my sister, you can follow her on Instagram. Her handle is astha.livelongerworld. But you horny boys better not be sliding into her DMs. Why something as strange as Live Longer World? Because she's recently been absolutely geeking out over longevity science. So much so that she also started a blog talking about longevity science. Anyway, long live my sister, long live you guys. Until next time, take care, stay safe, keep smashing it, and cheers.